Hey everybody, if you're looking to find out about concert and music photography, you're in the right place. This channel covers a lot of topics and subjects about concert and music photography that no one else covers, so stay tuned. Hey everybody, I'm Robert Maxfield and I've been photographing music since 1977. And over the years I've photographed Queen, Bad Company, Heart, Fleetwood Mac, Ted Nugent, Van Halen, Blue Oyster Cult, Yes, the Moody Blues, John Denver, Charlie Daniels, and more recently I've been photographing people like Eric Johnson, Ray Wylie Hubbard, Cody Kanda, Lee Brice, Orianthi, and many, many more. So I've been doing it a lot in a long time. So in this video, this video is going to be the second in a three-part series on Aperture, and it's going to cover Aperture and depth of field. It's a very special video to us because it's our 100th video and for the channel, which is a milestone. And on top of that, it's New Year's Day here in the Dallas area. So happy New Year's, happy 2024, and we're going to get started in just a second. So, what exactly is aperture? Aperture is, imagine your lens, and it literally is a tube in which light comes streaming down and through. In the size of that tube, inside of that tube there is a diaphragm that closes down and opens up, and that is called the aperture. Okay. That you'll hear it called f-stops, and you'll hear numbers like 1.4, 2.8, 4, 5, 6, and so on. This chart shows what your aperture will look like at whatever given f-stop you want to pick from. You'll notice the difference between f1.4 and f5.6, f11, and f16. And it can be one of the most difficult to understand parts of photography because it can be complex. But what it does is it controls not only the amount of light coming down through the tube and into the lens, but it also controls the depth of field. Say you have a subject like this pipe, how much is in front of and how much is it behind in focus is governed by the f-stop and the aperture. This chart shows you what a small aperture or a larger aperture and a medium aperture would look like with the finished product of the picture, so you can get a good idea of what you're dealing with. So why is it critical? It's very critical in concert photography because say you're shooting a band and you've got the guitarist in front and you've got the drummer in the back. One of them may be in focus and one of them not. So if you're trying to get both of them in focus, you need to do something a little special to get both of them in focus, as opposed to, you'll hear a lot of times people say, well, I got to have a big f2.8 lens and I always got to shoot a 2.8. No, that's not right. So there's a difference in the way things work, and it can be very dangerous. I'll give you an example. I'm going to show some pictures in a few minutes of where the neck of the guitar on somebody is out of focus. The mic in front of their mouth is in focus. This is Mike from Mike and the Moon Pies, and if you notice, the head of his guitar is not in focus and neither is the rear end. But in the middle, pretty much his face is in focus. You can have problems like one eye will be in focus and one eye will not. So the f-stop, the aperture, controls this kind of functions in your camera, and when you shoot it can be real critical. This is Susie Taylor, and she drove me nuts. If you look at her microphone, it is in focus. One eye is in focus and the other isn't, and it drove me crazy. Give you an example. We're going to cover a little bit about lenses. I've got my notes here because I got a lot of stuff to cover. So we're going to talk a little bit about lenses, and I'm going to try to keep this from becoming very long hair and rocket science, so it's not difficult. But we went over a little bit of the depth of field, but how things are affected also is the lens. And I'm going to show you the first part. You say, hey Bob, I don't know, I don't see that, what you're talking about. But when you look through the camera, the lens will close down or open up, and you will see Well, actually, it'll close down on modern cameras, and it will do it real quick, and it governs the amount of light that comes through the camera, through the lens. So what you're going to have is, say at f1.4 you're going to have a given amount. When you go to f2.8, it will cut that light in half. Then if you go to f4, it'll cut it in half again. So f1.4, f4 is a quarter of the light of what you're going to have from f1.4. And then let's say you go to 5, 6, and so on and so on. It's going to cut down the amount of light, but it's also going to increase the amount of depth of field in view you have in focus. So that's one thing that you have to be aware of. So if you're shooting wide open, you're leaving yourself open for depth problems. Another thing that's out there is to consider is the type of lens that you're using. Generally and typically, a wide-angle lens will give you more depth of field, more room, than a telephoto or a long lens. Okay, we're going to talk a little bit about the telephoto type lenses and their apertures and depth of field. The one thing most of the professional type telephoto lenses, the 70 to 200s, the 80 to 200s, the 80 to 400s, those kind of things. The longer the lens, typically the bigger and heavier it is. But also, when you use these lenses, the depth of field in front and behind of your subject tends to be a lot narrower. So at f2.8 it gets really narrow, but these things bring a beautiful bokeh if you're looking for that. But in concert photography, it can be a big pain or a hindrance, because there's times when you want two people in focus and you only get half of one.
This photo is of Orianthe and Eric Johnson. You'll notice neither one of them are in focus, and I used a wider focusing setup. I used a 9-point focusing on this one, so one of them should have at least been in focus.
And that's due to using too wide open of an f-stop. Even at f4.5, which I'll show in a picture here in a few seconds, that you still don't have enough depth of field with it. So you want to be very careful. But the longer the lens you go, the more susceptible you are to a shallower depth of field.
This shot is of Ali Venable, and there are various places in the photo that are sharp and in focus, and then there's various places that are not, even though they're separated by inches. The photo was shot at f4.5 in 1/125th of a second, so it was a little bit slow on the shutter speed.
So now if you watch the first video, which is on shutter speed, and then you just watched the majority of this video, which is on f-stop, you have to merge the two together to make a happy medium. It's kind of like riding a seesaw. You can have not enough shutter speed and too much depth of field, or you can have not enough depth of field and not enough too much shutter speed. So what happens is it's a very fine line as to getting the subject or what you want in focus due to incorrect settings of shutter speed and incorrect settings of f-stop. So you want to be very, very careful. That's where the next video, which is on ISO, comes into play, when how we figure out what exactly is your limits for your shutter speed and your limits for your f-stop and your aperture. In a few pictures I'm going to show in this video, I'm going to show where you can see there's part of a person that's in focus, another part of them is out of focus, and another part of them is in focus. You can see where you'll be able to see where there's one person in focus and then nobody in the back is in focus. So I'm going to try to show a few photographs like that. And that's one of the real big problems with low light concert photography, is the fact that you have to watch your shutter speed to make sure it's fast enough, and you have to make sure that your f-stop and your aperture is good enough that you're not riding that fine line of what's in focus and what's blurred. The other thing with it is too is where you focus on your subject has a big impact, because if you focus on, say you focus on their chest, you may find that their face is out of focus because they're leaned back a little bit.
Here's a prime example. I fought this guy over and over and over and finally got a good shot of him. But if you notice in this picture, the writing on his chest is in focus, but his face is blurry. And this is a prime example right here.
You might find out that there's a gap in there. If you focus a little further down on the mic, you may have their face out of focus. If you focus on the guitar, or you just generally random focus anywhere out there, you may have something you definitely don't want in focus, and that a lot of that has to do with that aperture and that f-stop having such a, at low light, having such a real narrow depth of field. So I'm going to show a few of those, and I'd like to say thank you. Our channel is growing. We appreciate you viewing. If any of this is of help to you, please drop us a note, send us some comments. We love to hear from you. If you have any questions, by all means, go ahead and ask. And everybody have a safe, happy New Year. And we appreciate y'all watching our videos. Thank you. Bye-bye.
This is Anna Popovic, and you'll notice that her face is in focus, but the head of her guitar is not. This is a lot more common than most people think in concert photography. You can see the same thing in Chris Duarte here. His head of his guitar is not in focus, but the rest of them is. Aerial posing, same thing. You'll see the same thing over and over and over. Notice here that Alex Aguilar's hat is in focus. It's not in focus, and his face is, so this is kind of a strange one. You can see Jamil Davis's arm is in focus and his shirt is in focus, but his face is not. The guy is awesome to listen to, and I appreciate it, and I did get some good shots of him, though.